Handheld emulation is one of my favourite ways to play retro video games, and the RG351P promises to be a retro emulation handheld powerhouse. But how does the RG351P stack up against other options like the Pocket Go and even your mobile phone? Hit the subscribe button, ring the notification bell, kick off your shoes and relax your socks while we review the RG351P handheld emulation device. Now, Anbernic were kind enough to send over to the channel an RG351P for us to review. Now, having used a Pocket Go in the past, my mobile phone, a Raspberry Pi and my laptop, I feel I've got a good grasp of being able to compare the RG351P to other options out there. A few months ago in one of my episodes, I discussed how I thought your mobile phone was the best way to play retro video games handheld. However, in that episode, I did state I hadn't gotten my hands on an RG351P to compare to that product directly. Today I've got one and I've been using it for the past 3 weeks, pretty much every single day. So let's find out how this compares to my mobile phone and all the other options for emulating retro video games in handheld mode. Now, first things first, let's talk about the packaging, because there were a couple of nice surprises in there that I didn't expect. The box that the RG351P comes in is pretty simple. It's just a white box with a little bit of a design on the front of the RG351P. And when you open the box, the first thing you see is the console. However, underneath the console are a few little extras. Now, as expected, there's a USB 3 cable in there for you to charge it. However, there's also a really good screen protector, and not one of these flimsy screen protectors that are really difficult to put on. I'm usually not a fan of screen protectors, but this one was really easy to apply, and when it's on, doesn't look like you have a screen protector on there at all. Now, next up, there's a Wi-Fi dongle in there, a tiny little dongle that you can plug into your RG351P to enable it to have wireless connectivity as well. Now, this I really thought was a nice little surprise. Granted, including that into the actual base design of the console would have been nicer, but I guess if they want to keep size down and to enable the extra space for all the buttons, it makes sense. With that being the design choice, you wouldn't be surprised if they just shipped it without a dongle and expected you to buy one for yourself. I mean, they're only about £10–15. However, to see that Anbernic put that in there already for you to use was a really nice surprise, and I thought that was a nice little touch and possibly an acknowledgement of that's something that is maybe expected in today's products, Wi-Fi connectivity. The final thing that was in the box was a USB 3 to a standard USB converter. This connector is used so then you can plug in a game controller, a USB game controller. Now, we'll get onto that a little bit more later on, but again, it was a nice little extra that they didn't need to add into the box. Now, when I took the 351P out of the box, the first thing I noted was how solid it felt as a design. It's made out of nice solid durable plastic with a nice matte finish as well. I went for the black option, and I think in black it looks really striking. And instantly, this gave me a feel of a more premium product, not some cheap small little emulation system. This honestly feels like something you wouldn't be surprised that one of the big names could bring out. For example, if Sony were to do a PSP classic, I would be happy if it had this design quality. And one of the reasons that makes me say that is because of the buttons and the button layout. First of all, the buttons and the D-pad and the X, Y, A buttons and the start and select all have a wonderful clickiness to it. That nice feel you expect from a game controller. The next thing I was really nicely surprised by were the analog sticks. These analog sticks feel premium and solid. And honestly, if we exclude the Nintendo Switch, I think these are the best analog sticks I've ever felt on a handheld console. You see, the PSP, the PlayStation Vita, and even the Nintendo DS, which offered different styles of analog sticks, didn't have that same quality feel as these. These actually feel like genuine, usable, real analog sticks. Whereas on the PSP, for example, it felt like a smaller, almost reduced functionality kind of stick, if you know what I mean. But both these sticks give you the nice kind of rubber texturized feel and the nice little resistiveness you want to feel in an analog stick. And the thing that really does impress me about this console is the fact that it has an L1, L2 and an R1 and R2 button layout as well. Actually, I have just noticed I've got two L1 buttons here. I guess they forgot to put the R1 button there and put the L1 there. So we've got L1, L2, R2, L1. I mean, it doesn't affect the functionality at all. I literally have been playing this every single day, and this is the first time I've noticed. It seems to just be the fact that it's printed L1 instead of R1. But that is pretty funny and something that Anbernic probably should look out for. I wonder how many other consoles have that. Hey, maybe I've got one of the rare misprint ones and this thing could be worth a fortune in future. But anyway, back to what I was saying, all the buttons have a wonderful feel to them, and it has every single button you would expect that you would need to play almost all modern video games. You see, again, if we look at the PlayStation P and even the PlayStation Vita, they didn't have 4 shoulder buttons like this. The PSP only had 2 shoulder buttons, and the PS Vita went for the workaround in that it had 2 physical buttons and 2 touch buttons on the pad at the back, which for me were not very natural and not comfortable to use. This is a really simple but well thought out design, and throughout using this every single day, I have not had any issues of using the buttons, especially the shoulder buttons. I would say my hands are average size, so I don't know if somebody with smaller hands or bigger hands might get a little bit cramped, but I've not had that issue at all. So to just round off the rest of the buttons and the inputs, we've got a volume rocker on the right hand side, we've got a reset button and an SD card on the bottom side, we've got the power button on the left hand side, and we've got 2 USB 3 ports and 1 audio jack on the top, as well as 2 little rubberized sections at the back there just to help with the grip. Now when you do switch on the RG351P, and it takes a slight delayed press, rather than a quick tap, it takes like half a second hold. It powers up with a little vibration and straight away goes into an absolutely wonderful menu. There you go. Now this is the thing that really stood out for me. It's the operating system on the RG351P. You see, on previous emulation devices like the Pocket Go, there is an operating system in there, but it feels more like a early 90s operating system. It feels a bit DOS-like, and it's definitely a system whereby maybe inexperienced users and younger users could easily get lost and maybe start to change settings that they shouldn't. Whereas the Anbernic RG351P has a fantastic operating system whereby it just brings you straight into a menu of all the emulators. And every single emulator is depicted with some wonderful artwork. For example, the DS, Sega, Nintendo, PlayStation, all of them have artwork which are relevant to the consoles and the games that are available for those consoles. And you can see how buttery smooth it is going through this menu. Once you find the actual emulator that you want to go for, so if we hit PlayStation, you go straight in and there is a list of video games. Now they can be organized in folder structure, as some of these are, and then some of them can be straight into the ROMs. And where the ROMs are, you can also have artwork for those. Now depending on whether there is artwork for those ROMs is dependent on whether you have the artwork loaded. But if it's loaded, then you'll be able to see it. You can back out and you can go to another emulator. Let's go and check out the N64. And there we have Banjo-Kazooie, Castlevania, Rayman, Mario Kart, and Super Mario 64. Find the game you want, press A, and it instantly jumps into it. A little bit of loading for the emulator, but before you know it, you're straight into it. Now this for me is a real game changer, and this makes this emulation station, this portable handheld, feel like a genuine video game console. It feels like a real premium handheld. It doesn't just feel like a little device that has a few emulators on there and just lets you play them. With the Pocket Go, I really enjoyed this device, but the operating system felt a little bit too apparent to me. And like I said, for younger users, and like when I'd let my son play it, I always worried that he'd end up finding himself lost somewhere in the menu system and maybe even changing settings that he shouldn't. Also, powering up and powering down the Pocket Go takes a certain sequence to do it properly. Yeah, you can power it off straight away, but it's not best for the operating system. The operating system on the RG351P seems to be pretty simple to just power it down and power it back on without causing any glitches or issues. And in terms of glitches and issues, in the 3 weeks of using the RG351P every single day, not once have I had a crash or an issue that has taken me out of the game. This is really good, and it's kind of essential for immersion to not have your game break on you instantly. But I think when it comes to emulators, that's something sometimes that we expect and we forgive. So to have a device that brings you straight into the operating system and hides all the shenanigans behind a nice cover, to enable you to load your games easily and simply, and then to let you play those games without interruptions, really is a great achievement. When you are in any video game, it is really easy to bring up the quick menu for the emulator as well. You press in both the analog stick. That menu is really simple and easy to use. Based on RetroArch, it has all the options you'd expect to see, but the first thing it presents you with is a quick menu with all the most relevant things like save states, being able to change your controls, and being able to quit out of the game. Once again, this is really simple, quick, and easy to use. Now, okay, the RG351P feels great. It's got loads of great buttons, it's got a nice slick UI, but how does it handle emulators and play in your games? Well, this, I'm happy to say, is the part that I'm most excited about. The RG351P offers emulation from 8-bit all the way up to the Dreamcast generation, and even goes on to support PlayStation Portable as well. That is pretty damn phenomenal, especially for a device that is so small and compact. Along with offering all that emulation opportunity, it also comes packed with hundreds, if not thousands, of games on its 64GB SD card. If you go into the library for, let's say, an 8-bit or a 16-bit console, you could easily find yourself scrolling through about 300 to 500 games. As you go up the generations and obviously the file sizes get bigger, the library reduces somewhat. The N64, for example, has 5 games that comes packed with it, whereas the PlayStation 1 has about 20 games, which is pretty staggering, to be honest. And all of the games are huge system sellers for those consoles. Games like Banjo-Kazooie, games like Mario 64, Dino Crisis for the PlayStation 1, Gran Turismo, Sonic Adventures for Dreamcast, and a huge selection of the best games for those consoles. Now, when it comes to emulation quality, I would say it hits the mark at about a 9 out of 10. Now, to go into a little bit more detail on that, every single game I tried from the 8-bit all the way up to the PlayStation generation and the PSP ran really smoothly. I came across no issues in graphics and no issues in the sound and music either. Now, I'm sure there will be a few examples throughout there where the emulation isn't necessarily spot on, but that will be down to the ROMs themselves rather than the emulator. That range I would categorize as the best emulation on the RG351P. The N64 would be the next stage, where on the N64 I saw a couple of small glitches. Things like maybe a brief stutter, or maybe where the transition in Banjo-Kazooie happens with a load of jigsaw pieces flying on wasn't as smooth as you would see on the actual console. However, those glitches were very minor and did not take away from the immersion and the gameplay. The actual gameplay itself felt smooth and enjoyable, and I've actually been playing through Banjo-Kazooie for the first time ever and enjoying it thoroughly. Now, the Dreamcast, and as amazing as it is for the Dreamcast emulation to be on this console, it was the weakest of all the emulators. I tried it with Sonic Adventures 2 and I tried it with Crazy Taxi, and unfortunately the audio skips quite a bit, especially in those 2 games. And along with the audio skipping, there's a little bit of jumpiness as well. You can play through those games no problem, and you could experience the full game. However, it does break the immersion a little bit, and whereas I would say the emulation for the rest of the actual consoles were around about a 9 out of 10, for the Dreamcast I would put it at about a 7 out of 10. Now, one thing I would also like to add is the DS emulation as well. I always wonder how consoles and emulators would handle the DS because of the dual screen situation of the DS. And I was really pleased to see that the RG351P, and I guess it's thanks to RetroArch, had a really nice, smooth way of handling the dual screens. You basically have 2 options. You can have the option where both screens are displayed at the same time, or you can display a single screen at once. But when you're displaying a single screen at once, you can switch to the other screen simply with the press of the L2 button. And for most games on the DS, this worked brilliantly. I was playing through Mario Kart, and as I was racing and wanted to quickly check the map, I'd quickly press L2 and then back again. And the transition is so quick and so smooth, it didn't once spoil the gameplay. Now, I'm not sure that will work for all DS games, but for the vast majority, it's a really good workaround. And a situation and an issue that most emulators are gonna have to face and find a way to deal with. Now, the RG351P comes packed, and I mean packed, with loads of video games. However, it is really simple and easy to add your own video games as well. The 64GB SD card that comes has around about 10 to 11GB spare, so you have space to add games from any generation. All you need to do is plug in your SD card into a laptop, and you want to access the games directory on there. Don't access the Emulate directory. That's the one that's handling all the emulation and the operating system. You don't want to mess with that one. Only access the games directory. Once you're in there, there'll be an obvious folder structure of all the different consoles and the BIOSes for those consoles. Just drop your ROM files into the relevant console folder and you're good to go. Put your SD card back into your RG351P, go to that relevant emulator and fire up your game. Obviously, I put Metal Gear Solid 1 in there. It didn't come on the device, and every device I have, if it can handle it, is gonna have Metal Gear Solid 1 on there. I put the ROM in, fired it up, and straight away it was running perfectly. And honestly, it's actually better playing Metal Gear Solid 1 on this device than it is playing it on my PS Vita. And that again is because of the extra buttons. Now, something else that's a really nice quality of life feature and something we've come to expect on handheld, at least premium handheld consoles, is a sleep function. And if you tap the power button, the RG351P goes into sleep mode. And it's absolutely brilliant. It's so smooth, just like you would expect from your PlayStation Portable or your PlayStation Vita. Once you tap the power button again, it loads up straight away exactly where you were. Most of the time I have my console in sleep mode when I'm not using it. And when it is in sleep mode, it doesn't seem to lose any battery. I mean, obviously it will use a small amount of battery, but it doesn't lose enough for you to actually come back to it and suddenly it's powered off and you've lost where you were in the game. Obviously, you'll be using save states to save your game to ensure you don't lose progress, and that's one of the best things about emulators. But the sleep mode is fantastic, and I have used it for days on end, jumping in and out of sleep mode, and the battery has lasted ages. Now, earlier in the episode, we discussed how it had 2 USB 3 ports, and that the console comes with a little USB 3 to standard USB adapter. That adapter can be used to connect your own USB controller. Now, I must admit, I tried doing this. I tried doing it with an Xbox 360 controller, and I tried doing it with just a USB controller I got off eBay. And unfortunately, they weren't plug and play. Straight away, you can see that the console recognizes the controller, but the controller instantly isn't set up to just start using. You can navigate through the menu system, no problem, and you can select the game you want to play. But when you jump into the game, as a standard, it sees port 1 as the controls on the console. So you have to go into the settings and change your port 1 settings from the built-in controls to the USB controller. When that's done, you then need to set up your button layout as well. And this honestly got a little bit finicky. I've done this before on my RetroPie, and it's the same menu system in terms of setting up your controllers that you'd expect to see on a RetroArch device. However, like I said, it was a bit finicky, and in the end I gave up. I got it working on Banjo-Kazooie, but because of the awkward N64 controller layout, I got a little bit lost, so I just unplugged it and carried on playing. I'm sure if you spend a bit of time, you'll be able to set up a controller, and you'll be able to play with your mates on the same device. But I'm not really sure if you'd want to play Mario Kart split screen on a device with a screen this small. It's a big screen, don't get me wrong, but it's too small for split screen in my opinion. Now, all in all, the RG351P is a fantastic little handheld console. It has a couple of niggles. Its build quality is brilliant, but as we discovered early in the episode, I got 2 L1 buttons. Again, doesn't affect the functionality, but maybe that's a little head nod towards quality control. Although that could be a complete fluke to me because everything else about the console just feels so solid and well built. The operating system is fantastic, and it has all the quality of life features you would expect to make it an easy pick up and play handheld console. Something that's great for retro gamers like us, or something that's great to give to your kid and know that they can safely just play video games without getting lost in some kind of crazy operating system. It comes packed with loads and loads of video games and extra functionality, even if that functionality is not necessarily something you'd want to use like the controller support. It's nice to know that it's there. The emulation quality from 8-bit all the way up to the PlayStation 1, PSP and N64 generation is absolutely brilliant. However, the Dreamcast emulation, as nice as it is to have on the console, is not and will not be my preferred way to play video games on the Dreamcast. Now, Ambernick did send me the RG351P to review on the channel, but I was not going to be easy on this device because, as I've said in the past, playing retro video games through my mobile is my favorite way to emulate video games. However, is that still my opinion? Honestly, the last 3 weeks I have done nothing but keep this little bad boy in my pocket every single day, and every single opportunity I've been playing it, not just for the purposes of reviewing it for the channel, but because I'm just having so much fun. I'm getting to experience Banjo-Kazooie in my hand for the first time ever, and I am thoroughly loving it. It's giving me that rush of nostalgia. It's taken me back to being a child, and it doesn't feel like I'm playing an emulator. It doesn't feel like I'm having a reduced experience. There is so much to be said for emulating on your mobile phone, especially when you're using a controller clipped onto the phone as well. However, the buttery smoothness of the RG351P, the operating system, the games that are packed into this thing already and will not take up space from my mobile phone mean that this is now my preferred preferred way to play retro video games on the go. Honestly, I am really impressed by this product. And the way I see it, my gauge is always this: would I go out and buy that console with my own hard-earned money? And you can find this thing for, I've seen it going for anywhere between £50 to £80. I think on average it's about $80. And I am actually considering right now ordering another one for my son to have, because he has had his eye on this ever since I got it. And he's looking over my shoulder watching all the video games I'm playing. I did give him the Pocket Go, but like I said, he's gotten a little bit lost in the menu system and it does keep crashing on him now. I'm sure I can fix those issues, but I've just not gotten around to doing it. I want to give my son a little handheld console where he can experience all the amazing retro video games of my past in a way where I can just give him it and he can just switch it on and start playing. And that is what the RG351P can do. So yes, I would go out with my hard-earned money and I would buy one of those within a heartbeat. Now, am I going to go out and buy one for my son? Well, I'm not going to say, because he watches my episodes and it's nearly Christmas time, so we're going to have to see if Father Christmas might bring one. But one thing I can definitely say is it is a fantastic little retro emulation handheld, and a little device that will warm any retro gamer's hearts. Now, if you want to get your hands on an RG351P, then I'll put a link in the description below. If you enjoyed this episode and you love retro games and you're interested in emulation handhelds as much as I am, then hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss out on future episodes. Once again, thank you for watching and see you next time. A big thank you to my Patreon supporters who help make these videos possible, including Hilazing Retro Gaming and Jack Mawson. If you want to show your support for Chronik Spartan games, then you can head on over to chronicspartan.com and check out our indie games. You can become a Chronik Spartan patron at patreon.com, or you can kick off your shoes and relax your socks with some Chronik Spartan merch from tpublic.com. All links are in the description below. The simplest and easiest way to show your support is to just hit that subscribe button. Thank you for tuning in.